critical focus channel.
So, I figured I'd do a video on my feelings on Warhammer Underworlds 2.0 after playing it frequently for the better part of a year. So I think this video was due, but I also didn't want to make it too early, but rather let things simmer a bit and let my initial feelings get out of the way and sort of get replaced with my experience of it all. I will say these opinions are shaped from someone coming over from a very deep love and passion for the first edition of the game. So much that I made this a very big time investment for all of my weeks for the better part of 3 years. These opinions would probably be totally different if I came into this edition fresh, without having played the first edition, of course. I can't undo my years of playing the first edition, nor do I wish to. And to sort out this experience, we need to start with the first edition, how it felt for me, and I guess a lot of people, at its twilight hour. First edition had its issues, that's for sure. Fighter cards were getting very crowded, full of reactions and keywords and whatnot. We had warbands with complicated inspire mechanics. Hexbanes, for example, as well as Griselles, were all fighters inspired differently and individually. Deck building had already been slimmed down, however, with the removal of the championship format, so I don't necessarily think that deck building was a major gatekeeper for new players. Rivals format existed as well after all and was a good starting point then, just as it is now. The individual inspires and reactions, etc. on the fighter cards was not only a negative, mind you. In my opinion, it really served a purpose to achieve interesting and lore-accurate mechanics to reflect the uniqueness and the background of each fighter and warband. But it could oftentimes be a confusing experience, especially for a new player, leading to a sort of whoever remembers the most wins situation, and that's not a good experience. We had card art on the fighter cards on all of the decks, and albeit this has been a big negative for the new edition, for a lot of old-timers the card art was in earnest of a varying quality, and I don't actually believe all of these people stopped playing the game solely for this fact, especially the more competitive bunch using this narrative. But the fact that some rival decks had art from Nethermaze, some from Nullwood, some from Shadespire, etc., did to a large degree immerse you into the setting. And they are all interesting settings, in my opinion far more interesting than the current one, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's stay in first edition a bit longer. Reaction windows was also sort of a confusing experience for a lot of new players, with the reactions to the declare attack step, after landing a hit, after dealing damage, after the drive back, etc, etc. It was all a bit convoluted and needed changing. Effect stacking. This was, in my opinion, a big issue with the previous edition, where you could, even on a measly range 3 1 damage attack, get up to 3-4 damage quite easily with, say, Glory Seeker, Fighter's Ferocity, and some faction card. And on melee attacks to insane amounts, like 6-7 damage, to the point of it's just dumb. So to sum it up, first edition had become a bloated beast, but a fun, lovable beast still, with a lot of character and flavor. So moving on to the second edition. First up, let's discuss the fighter cards. The fighter cards now had the model's image, and although I don't hate this, I do think it's a downgrade. Yes, it's very clear for your opponent to see which fighter goes with which model, and I can see why they did it, but it's just less fun. Having the picture of the model in the corner, make it a bit bigger than in the first edition, would have been preferable in my opinion. The fact that we don't have the inspires or a ton of text on each fighter cards, I don't generally mind this. It's a lot easier to read the cards now, and I like that. But I will return to this point. I do, though, dislike the fact that the names have been dumbed down. Snorbo da Spore, Quiet Pock, and Grib the Wonky Lands is now simply called Snorbo, Pock, Grib. I hate this, I really do. Those little extra words really meant something, and it's an unnecessary thing to remove. I get the streamlining of things, but the removal of this kind of stuff isn't streamlining. It's just making things more boring. It's just less magic and less immersive. What I also miss is having the little names of the fighters' attack profiles there. Pix, Grave Robber's Pick, Iltharis, The Reaping, or Mayaris, Searing Beams. Why GW? Why? I do like the fact that we have the melee and range tags on the weapon, which makes things very clear, while previously we had the range 3 plus attack actions and the range 1, 2, which was a bit cluttered, so I am on board for this one. It makes it super clear for the equipping of upgrades, etc. The War Scrolls then. The idea is good, and for some warbands that had atrocious faction decks might have even gained some flavor from this, but mostly it's also less magical, less emerging, and the war cryization, I guess, of the weird and the eerie setting that Underworlds is. Yes, you always have these effects from the War Scroll at your disposal rather than at the mercy of a card draw, but that also means your opponent can never be surprised by these effects, lest they forget them, which is of course very reasonable, especially in my case. They know now exactly what you have at your disposal when it comes to your faction flavor. Going in with a 2 damage with Grievous attack on Hexbane, not knowing if the by hook or by crook ploy is in their hands or not, rather than knowing the Ward of Martyr's Blood has still been unused, makes a big difference to your decision making and the narrative aha moment of that experience. It's simply more dull, no way around it. The Inspires, I think, is mostly positive. We don't need a ton of individual Inspire mechanics for every single fighter. And as I mentioned earlier, some warbands were really cluttered down with this type of thing, with individual Inspires. But at the same time, some of them also served to tell a story. Rather than each member of the Thricefold Discord being able to inspire off of any of their colleagues failing, we had, for example, Vexmore loathing Vashtis that little bit more than he did Leskivir. And for Hexbane's hunters, the grumpy woodcutter Amos Duncarrow was the protector of Haskell Hexbane and thus inspired when his leader was targeted. Yes, it was a bit much to keep track of if you didn't play with or against the single warband all of the time, but it was more fun, that's for sure. But I think generally it's a good thing to move away from it. I just wish more of the flavor could have been kept. But sometimes you just can't have everything at once. The setting, I think, actually is the least interesting plane of existence in the mortal realms. It's all fire and rage and just lacks the eerie, weird feeling of what disturbing stuff was lurking around the next corner in, say, Shadespire or Harrowdeep. The boards. This is mostly a positive for me. Major offsetting and longboarding was not generally very fun, and you could sometimes be almost defeated upon losing boards, even in a best of 3, because your disadvantage to playing longboard were bigger than your advantage to playing straight, for example, and then the deficit you suffered in game 1 would basically be unsurmountable even if you had a straight board set up in the following game. That being said, just a single board gets a bit boring after a while, and you start to miss your old Harrowdeeps and your word hollow, disturbing, meat-eating tree boards with a lot more interesting design. And the single board setup is also rough sailing for, say, the sort of summoning warbands that have a very pivotal leader that needs to sort of survive to make your warband work. It's very easy to sort of alpha strike those warbands. There is some issues with the boards, but generally I think it's a positive from a mechanical standpoint. General rule changes. My biggest positives with the new edition is probably that effect stacking has been done away with. I'm also very positive to the changes of crits, even though, same there, it does take away some really thematic moments for you. But it also takes away some grueling moments when you have 4 successes versus 1 crit. And I think the fact that you can reduce damage with the clutch crit elevated that to a large enough degree that the changes to crits wins me over. I also quite like the overrun and stand fast rules respectively. I think they are both a neat design, still making those rolled crits rewarding enough. The underdog mechanic is subtle enough to be a good addition as well, and made even better now with the errata. The decks then, yeah, same there, no card art is a loss for me, don't get me wrong. All of the art previously wasn't awesome, and some of the action shots of the models are great now, but I think it's just a general downgrade for me. Less magic, straight and simple as that. The decks also feels much more bland, We have a ton of copies of similar cards across the deck with like a handful of cleave, keen eye, great strength, great fortitude, great speed, etc. floating around. The flavor of these decks does not nearly immerse me as much as something like the Cthulhu-esque Void-Cursed Thralls deck or the disturbing Malevolent Masks. It's mostly fire, rage, and things go kaboom. And yeah, dull. So summing things up, is Underworlds 2.0 a great game? No doubt. Is it better balanced than the first edition? Most likely. Is it a better experience for new players and less confusing generally? Probably, yeah. All good things, right? And I still really enjoy the game, don't get me wrong. But what was true love before has now become more of a really good friend. Underworlds 1 sure had its issues, we all know that, but the magic, the weird and the interesting was also much better executed. And the slimming down, although in places executed well, did in the process sadly kill off a large amount of that magic. Again, these are my thoughts. Now I want to hear or at least read your thoughts in the comments down below. Make sure to like the video if you liked it, subscribe for more nerdy content, and have a great rest of your day. Take care. Bye. Lastly, a big shout out to all my members that help support my content and makes it so much easier for me to produce multiple videos on a weekly basis. Members do get access to the member Discord, get to influence the content, get early access to a ton of videos, as well as get featured in the monthly painting showcase if they want. Member or not, I dearly appreciate the like, the comment, and the subscription.